Start.
Good afternoon and welcome to Book Passage and another special installment of Conversations with Authors. And I guess we can officially still say Happy New Year to our upcoming authors as well as our audience, especially since this is our first official event of the new year. So Happy New Year and welcome everybody. If you haven't already done so, please do take the time to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a very quick, easy thing for you to do, but it just means so much to Book Passage and really helps us out. So thanks for doing that. Thank you also for supporting your local independent bookstore in this newish landscape, literary landscape of mostly virtual events and a lot of back and forth in between variants with live, virtual, live. But no, we're not. Yes, we are. We know you have lots of options, whichever way it goes, and especially online. So we really don't take that for granted, and we really appreciate your attendance and your business and supporting the authors that we feature by purchasing their books, either online, in store, or call us up on the phone. I know they really do appreciate that. This event is one of the first, no, it is the first of the new year as mentioned, and I think it's great that we're coming out with a big bang. By that I mean both our authors today have new books and they are getting a lot of buzz. I've read both of them and it's all well deserved, and obviously they'll be getting into that each themselves. The event's featured book, The School of Good Mothers, by Jessamine Chan, is this taut, explosive debut novel. One lapse in judgment lands a young mother in a government reform program where custody of her child hangs in the balance. Frida Liu is struggling. She doesn't have a career worthy of her Chinese immigrant parents' sacrifice, or so she feels, and she has lost her husband to a younger woman. Her toddler daughter is the one bright spot in her life, but that relationship begins to unravel when she starts experiencing what she refers to as a very bad day. Jessamine Chan's short stories have appeared in Tin House and Epoch. She's a former reviews editor at Publishers Weekly, and her work has received support from the Elizabeth George Foundation and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and many, many more. She lives in Philadelphia, and she joins us from Philadelphia. Joining her today and kind of steering our conversation today is the equally talented Chloe Cooper-Jones. Chloe is a writer based in New York. She's a Whiting Award winner and a finalist for the 2020 Pulitzer Prize in Feature Writing. Her first book, Easy Beauty, will be out in early April. With that, I want to welcome these very talented authors we're so happy and proud to have. Please welcome to the Book Passage virtual stage.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Paula, and thank you for Chloe for moderating this event.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a true honor to be here. But you're going to read for us a little bit, right?
I am going to read the passage that's actually been excerpted online. So I'm just going to read the first 2 pages. I'm still getting used to holding a hardcover. It's very exciting.
I like that you've already taken the dust jacket off, which is.
Oh, I do that with all of my. I think I'm so finicky that I do that with all of my books.
I do the
I'll
same.
put it back on, I promise. Okay, so this is the beginning of chapter 1. We have your daughter. It's the first Tuesday in September, the afternoon of her one very bad day, and Frida is trying to stay on the road. On the voicemail, the officer tells her to come to the station immediately. She pauses the message, puts down her phone. It's 2:46 p.m. She meant to get home an hour and a half ago. She pulls onto the first side street off Grace Ferry and Double Parks. She calls back and begins apologizing, explaining that she lost track of time. Is she okay? The officer says the child is safe. Ma'am, we've been trying to reach you. Frida hangs up and calls Gust, has to leave a message. He needs to meet her at the station at 11th and Wharton. There's a problem. It's Harriet. Her voice catches. She repeats the officer's promise that their daughter is safe. As she begins driving again, she reminds herself to stay under the speed limit, to avoid running red lights, to breathe. All through Labor Day weekend, she felt frantic. Last Friday and Saturday, she had her usual insomnia, sleeping 2 hours each night. On Sunday, when Gus dropped off Harriet for Frida's 3.5 days of custody, Harriet was in the throes of an ear infection. That night, Frida slept 90 minutes, last night an hour. Harriet's crying has been relentless, too big for her body, too loud for the walls of their tiny house to absorb. Frida did what she could. She sang lullabies, rubbed Harriet's chest, gave her extra milk. She laid on the floor next to Harriet's crib, held her impossibly perfect hand through the bars, kissed her knuckles, her fingernails, feeling for the ones that needed to be trimmed, praying for Harriet's eyes to close. The afternoon sun is burning as Frida pulls up to the station, located 2 blocks from her house in an old Italian neighborhood in South Philly. She parks and rushes to the reception desk, asks the receptionist to see her daughter, a toddler, 18 months old, half Chinese, half white, big brown eyes, curly dark brown hair with bangs. You must be the mother, the receptionist says.
Woo-hoo. I just love this book so much. It's so exciting to get to talk to you. When you texted me and asked me to do this, I like let out a little whoop, like a shriek of joy. And I think it's especially incredible because I get to talk to you a full week into pub. And so I have seen some of the unbelievable things that have happened for you this week. You got to announce that the film rights have sold. You were the Read with Jenna pick. And then you just told me, which I think is rude of you, that you just told me like a minute ago, that you just got a rave review from the New York Times. So I want to just say, I know this is hard and sort of vague question to start off with, but like, how's this week felt? Did you have hopes that things would go so well? And is this the most successful debut that anyone could ever have? I mean, this week has just been like incredible, like such a dream.
It has been such a dream. I am sorry I didn't text you. I was frantically running around. I think I also discovered that the only thing I could text people was the link, and then just write like a bunch of like capital A and then exclamation point. Like, so I was a little bit incoherent for a couple hours. I think I was fairly even keel last week, but I think the New York Times review definitely just sent my brain into just like a puddle of happy goo. But it's really been a dream come true in so many ways. But it's also been like completely surreal because I like all these pieces of really exciting news have been shared, but I don't actually see anyone. So I'm experiencing like wild joy with like my husband and daughter and my parents, but I actually haven't seen anyone else in the past week, like face to face. So it's been like thrilling, and then also like kind of surreal just given the world right now. But it was great to finally be able to share like secrets that have been kept for a long time. And I mean, I'm 43 now. I've been writing since I was 18. So it's been, this is realizing the dream of like my whole adult life. And it's really, really, I couldn't wish for more. It was amazing.
Oh, that gives me, and it's so well deserved. And I think, I know because we're friends and because I've been able to see a little bit behind the scenes that it's not all just waiting for good reviews to come in. I know that you have been doing so much work, so many emails, so many meetings, so much figuring out tech stuff for podcasts or for IG Lives or Zooms. And the thing that's like really amazed me is for months and even all the way through your pub week, I think even just as recently as Friday, you're constantly doing things for other people's books. You're mentioning people's books in interviews. You did somebody else's book launch with them or book events with them. And you have been like, as you've been writing this incredible wave and working nonstop, I also see you just constantly lifting up other writers, especially other debut writers or other contemporary writers. And I wondered, like, is that something that's felt really grounding to you, that, writing can be so lonely? We're doing this in such a lonely time, such an isolating time. Have you found some sort of strength or just grounding in really trying to be a part of a collective of writers that are working right now?
That's a really good question. I will give a plug for Taylor Harris, whose event I hosted last Friday. Her book, This Boy We Made, comes out today, and she's doing her launch event with Nicole Chung tonight. And unfortunately, I can't attend because I have to do a different live thing tonight. But I'm
not even answering the question. You're already going.
I really encourage everyone to attend at the Strand. I had a lot of years of practice of being a cheerleader for other people, because I finished grad school a really long time ago. I think I finished in 2011, and so a lot of my friends are on their second or third books, so I've certainly had a lot of practice cheering other people on, and I really longed to be part of the literary community when I was after college, when I was living in Chicago. And it's funny to now have my reality be so filled with writers, and my daughter thinks that the only job you can have is book writer. She thinks that's the only thing people do for work. So because she thinks all of mommy's friends are book writers, and I think she thinks you can be a book writer and a PhD student, and that's it in terms of careers. But it's really fun to chime in and help lift up other people, because talking about oneself is I still find it kind of mortifying, and so I'm more than happy to talk about other people's books. And one author, Liv Stratman, who wrote Cheat Day, I don't know how she took this on during pre-pub, but she organized a whole Slack channel of debut authors that had, I think it started out with 18 people, and I think there's 95 or something now for debut authors for a couple different years. And it was just a way for everyone to share information and support each other, because she wanted people to have a way to connect during the pandemic, because we were all launching our books during the pandemic and dealing with a whole different set of challenges. And so that was a great way to meet a bunch of other people, and to get to know some of the other writers publishing on my pub day and feel like we're all in it together.
Yeah. And I know you went to Columbia and you have some friends that you met at Columbia that are still your close friends who are really great writers. Do you have a few friendships or, from Columbia or from other places that have felt like really powerfully collaborative friendships, like people who have, through their writing or through sharing your writing with them, have really helped you grow, like this book, or grow as a writer in general?
Well, I only wish I could have doubled the length of my acknowledgements. I like saying thank you. I'm also Chinese, and I'm also from the Midwest. And so I like being polite and thanking people a lot. I think the two writers who specifically helped grow this book, not just in spirit and emotional support, but being really in it with me, were my friends Yvonne Woon and Keith Wilson, because they received one chapter at a time over 2 years, I think, and just them saying, I want to know what happens next, and sharing their thoughts was so important. I talked to Diane Cook and Hillary Lecter all day long, every single day. So we've joked about one time, at some point doing an event, all three of us, so it'll be our group chat, but live. So I feel like talking to you now, it's our text conversations, but look, it's a literary event instead of just texting each other.
Yeah. Well, I thought of this because I had sort of teased you on Twitter where I was saying, oh, I'm just gonna take all my questions from our punchiest texts. But so I started looking back through my texts, and at least half of them are you saying, do you need a blurb? Do you need this? Can I do this? I'm thinking your book. I'm thinking about this. Oh, let's think about your book. And I was like, oh my God, in the busiest, most stressful time probably of your life, you're just constantly offering support to me. And I see you doing it for so many other people. But also throughout this week, especially as news has come out, I'll just text you and I'll think that you'll never respond, you know, because you'll be so busy, but you always text back. And it's just been like, it's such an incredible thing to see the camaraderie, I think, that you've built. I know you're blurbing a lot of books, like you're doing so much. And I think that's something that maybe other people don't recognize. They don't know, like they're just seeing this hugely, you know, these amazing reviews. And it's like you're putting in work on so many levels. But one thing I did see in our text was one of the first things I sent to you as I was reading your book. I sort of was like live texting you all my reactions, was I said, you know, sometimes people read your book and they'll say like, it's so stressful, but I think it's also really funny. I think it's hysterical and like such a dark, and also like such a profoundly balanced way. So I wanted to ask you about like just tonal variety in this. Did you look at the book either from the beginning or in revisions and think about what you wanted the tone to do, like how many sort of places you wanted to take the emotions of this book?
That is a really tough question, because I think one thing that I found with talking about the book during like pre-pub and now is that you have to place a narrative on a lot of decisions that were made by instinct. And for me, a lot of the humor came from me writing to entertain myself while I was working on this alone for years and years. And I wish I could say that, like, I know that in screenwriting, like you map out the beats, like a skill that I don't have, but I understand like there's a little bit more of a plan there, but I don't think I went into at least the creation of the early drafts with a plan. It's something that I worked on a lot with my amazing agent, Meredith Kefel-Simonoff, who worked with, if there's more humor, it's definitely through Meredith's guidance. And I worked a lot on that with my first editor, Dawn Davis, who was working on the developmental edits with me. And so we definitely pulled things back when it got maybe a little too repetitive and dark, or we amped up the humor and this like had the secondary characters do a little more. So I think having external readers like Yvonne and Keith, and I shared the manuscript with a lot of people before I sent it to Meredith, before I like tried to query agents and eventually signed with Meredith. I got feedback there, and so that was really helpful for understanding like where there's a little too much humor, where there's a little too much darkness. But the initial creation of that was definitely by instinct rather than having a plan. I hear that it's a lot more efficient to have a plan, but I definitely was just sort of figuring things out by trial and error.
Well, but maybe I'm wrong, but didn't this in some ways grow out of a short story? I feel like I've heard you say that you actually had the whole story before you wrote, like you knew how it was going to end, right? That's like a plan.
I did have a plan, but to get to that story draft was something that definitely just emerged from my imagination. And I didn't sit down thinking, today I'm going to write about this subject and I'm going to write like a high concept plot driven novel. Like I definitely didn't have all the notes I want to hit and like what part of the literary fiction world I wanted to tackle. Like it was more just me scribbling in a notebook and having a lot of bad ideas until I had a good one. So in that sense, I didn't sit down with a plan, but once I had that story draft, that's what I worked to develop. And so it's something that came out of a really good writing day, but then just took years to turn into a real manuscript.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you more about this sort of working from the story and the challenges of one, just sort of shifting, the scope, right, from short story to novel. But also, I was thinking a lot about this because when I read your book, and this happens every once in a while, where I read a book and I just think, this is so remarkably self-assured, and it's so remarkably like it just knows what it is. And that was the thing I felt with your book. I just felt like you start on page 1, you know what it is. And I felt like so, like I had full confidence in the person that was pulling me through this story. I think that's remarkable for any book. I think especially for a debut, and a debut that you worked on for a long time. So theoretically, it must have gone through a lot of iterations. And yet the tone is so phenomenally like strong, confident, self-assured. The tone, the setting, the characters, all these things feel so fully realized. And I was wondering, how did you sort of get there over the years? And do you think in some ways, like having that core story to work from, in the sense that like you had this essential sort of concept of what the thing was, do you think that really helped you keep that consistent and confident tone throughout the larger book?
I'm really glad you think the tone is confident. I think it's something that, along with the pacing, worked because of the editing, because the shaky parts got cut, and a lot of times some of the editing choices were made based on like keeping the story really tight. And I'm definitely a writer who loves editing, so that's been my great downfall as a writer, that I cut so much. And so the hard thing about going from short story to novel is that, I mean, I'm like a word cutter by nature, so I couldn't really fathom how long it would take to actually write a full book. So what I did was write the whole thing longhand, which is very, very slow. And so I didn't edit anything until I got to the very last scene. So I would just type up the longhand drafts every so often. And then I just had this like completely insane pile of pages at the end. But I think if I had worked differently and like tried to write chapters from the beginning, I don't know that I would have gotten to the end, because I would have done so much second guessing. But I think the tone that I was there from the very first story draft. Like the voice of the story was there from the very beginning. But I tend to think of it as like I was trying to go for like an almost jaunty tone, like a fun with Dick and Jane, like sort of. I think one teacher, like Percival Everett, in a workshop, he said that the writing was deceptively simple. And I really loved that description, because it's supposed to feel effortless, but a great deal of effort went into it. And to just cutting the sentences just so to, because I wanted the actual momentum to be within the lines, like sentence by sentence, so that the reader would keep being pulled along, even if you're heading into like kind of stressful territory.
Yeah, I think you accomplished that to such a high degree. I mean, one thing I kept thinking as I was reading the sentences is that they're very straightforward in a certain sense, but the accumulation of them creates so much texture. So even if you're describing, Frida in her house, in a sort, cleaning her house, worried about, there's such anxiety that's built underneath the sentences that just creates this texture that builds and builds and builds and builds. And I think that's why some readers were like, I'm so stressed out, because it's true. You're just like flipping the pages and just getting so much deeper into the story with her. And I think you do that in a way that really does live underneath the explicit, sentence, in a way that's like, it's just masterful. I'm just curious really quick, is there anything you cut that you miss?
Oh, I think the stuff that got cut, it's okay that it got cut. The early drafts are kind of a funny artifact of how little I understood about infants and toddlers, because I wrote the first draft before having a baby. And so I had the toddlers speaking in paragraphs. Like Frida and Harriet had very long scenes of conversation. Like they had serious conversations about serious things, because I didn't understand that a 20-month-old doesn't speak in sentences, like actual fire. And I had them bathing the toddlers in sinks. I don't know that anyone's going to believe me, but the draft that Meredith saw when I first signed with her was even darker than the book that's been published. So like other dark things got edited out in the service of having more momentum and a little more light in the story.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I felt was it was like the most chilling thing about the book. And I've heard people, call it sci-fi or speculative fiction, which I guess technically it is, but you give us a world that is just like right next to the one we have. It's like right there. And so even though we're reading about this sort of sci-fi school or whatever, it all feels so real. And there were, my son is older than yours, so I've been reading about parenting for a long time, and there were sentences or passages of advice that these women were being given at the school that felt just verbatim from actual parenting blogs or verbatim from actual parenting books. And I think that was sort of the most chilling thing, that if you took that advice and just put it in this different context, it seems dystopian, whereas in fact it's really what women are being, or mothers, or especially parents, but mothers especially, are being told, or the advice they're given. And so I'm so curious, like there's an aspect of this book that feels really well researched. Like, were you reading a ton of these things and taking from them, or like how did sort of the language of the advice or the lessons of the school get shaped for you?
The lessons are partly drawn from real life ideas, but taking like a kernel of real life and making it insane. Like I took the idea that you're supposed to pay close attention to your child, and I made it like a punishable offense if you ever look away from them. So it's taking something that exists and blowing it up for the purposes of social satire. But I read a lot of books about overwhelmed American parents, and those are very interesting books to read while pregnant, which is what I did, because I basically wrote the whole first draft without doing much research, because I just wanted to make stuff up and see what I came up with. And then I went back and did some reading to try to like reshape parts of the story or develop secondary characters. And I think I didn't want to get bogged down in research and have it derail just the getting to the last chapter goal. But I read about things like the family law, and so the book is one spark of inspiration came from a New Yorker article called "Where Is Your Mother" by Rachel Aviv. So after I read that article and became fascinated with the topic, I went to read a lot of the books and articles cited in that article, which led me down a whole rabbit hole of other reading. So I read about some of the trends in the policy regarding termination of parental rights. And I read a lot of stories about moms who'd gotten in trouble with Child Protective Services, and also read just to get a sense of, like, I felt American parenting culture was quite oppressive and crazy, and it turns out that lots of other people think so too, and they've done extensive research. So some of that was just confirming a hunch I had. But once I was a parent myself, it was just fascinating to be immersed in the like very intense parenting culture that I'd only read about. And so I definitely did some stealing from the world around me.
Yeah. I told my mother when I was reading this, I told her about the book, and she said, well, you're not really a mother till somebody's told you you're a bad mother. And I thought that was so sad, but at the same time rang so true. Isn't that so depressing? But I think there was something about reading your book and reading these things and feeling so much of it rings true, that I think it was also kind of cathartic, like in a way, to sort of just be like, oh, that's right. I'm constantly going to be judged as a mother. There's also going to be so many cultural misunderstandings that are going to affect the way that people see me as a mother. And in some ways, like just really going into this sort of worst case scenario was for me like sort of cathartic, and in a way like freeing. Has it felt like that at all to you? Like, have you felt like in writing this or thinking about it, you've sort of processed some of those fears that you had going into motherhood, or some of those fears that you have of other people misinterpreting you as a mother?
I think the book really became a home for everything I was freaking out about. So I think I maybe put a little bit less pressure on my own parenting, because I was constantly thinking about how parents are judged and feeling angry about that. So I think because I was always dealing with that, that allowed me to be a little bit more forgiving of myself. But I mean, I still get racked with guilt about most things. But I think I was most surprised that I because I was working on the book and channeling all my like high intensity energy into the book, I found that I was a little bit easier on things like expecting my daughter to walk at a certain age, or expecting her to be highly verbal at this stage or that stage. And I think because I like a lot of my forward movement, like life energy was going into the manuscript, I think I was more just like, she'll get there, she'll be fine. So yeah, it was funny to be working on a book that's a lot about like people following rigid rules, because my husband and I are a little bit on the lazy side. Like, we are surrounded by parents who do a lot of research, and so we just tend to like have them explain to us about the books that they read. Because I mean, I bought that book, How to Talk So Your Children Will Listen, and I bought it I think early in the pandemic, and it's now a year and a half later, and I still haven't read it yet. And the most I've gotten around to it is like my daughter and I will look through the cartoons, and we'll read the cartoons out loud. So she sometimes would ask to read the parenting book, but that was the most that I ever did, was like look at it with her, because I think we just follow the philosophy of like, we're doing the best we can. And I think it's definitely I think I'm decently researched with the book. I'm very under-researched in real life.
Well, I've never even heard of that parenting book. So maybe, is it famous? Is this a very famous parenting book? So I may be even further behind.
We'll talk. I haven't, so I can't. Everyone recommends it. I actually bought it because Lydia Kiesling wrote an essay about it. And so I thought, like, it's recommended by a fiction writer, I must buy a copy, but then I haven't ever gotten around to reading it.
My favorite text exchange is when we both watched The Lost Daughter on the same day. And then we're like, did you watch The Lost Daughter? And then you said, this is very on brand for us. The Lost Daughter. It's like, we get it. Well, I mean, so Frida as a mother, I think is just so fascinating. And I heard you talk about this in another of your book events, and I thought it was so important that I really wanted you to talk about it again. You were saying that, you know, Frida's decision, or Frida's very bad day, her decision to leave her daughter at home for a period of time. You were saying that you had gotten advice at different stages of this book draft to maybe have her very bad day be less morally ambiguous, to make it more innocuous, to make her a more easily likable or sympathetic character, but that it was really important for you to, and I'll butcher what you actually said. You said it so beautifully the other day. You said something like you wanted Frida to represent a full range of like complex modes of being, and not just be a person you could have like an immediate or easy feeling about. And I think that the other really big risk that you take in this book, and it pays off so well, is you actually don't ever make it easy. Like throughout the whole book, all the decisions she's making, all the experiences that we're following along with her, her relationships with other people in the book and the other women at the school, they actually just make her more and more and more complex. and challenging and expansive as a human. And so I'm curious, like, how you hit that balance, and also how you received some of the advice from others to maybe make her a little, I don't know, sunnier or something, or easier to understand.
Well, I think with the character Frida, I was definitely writing a character that I wanted to read. I mean, I don't really gravitate toward sunny, easily likable female characters. I like the twistier, more complicated ones. And yeah, I got advice that maybe I should have her do something easier to root for, like easier to understand. Like, she left her daughter in the car seat, went in to get her wallet, and then got caught by like a bystander who called the cops on her or something. Like, that would be just a harmless mistake. So I felt that wasn't really true to the project that I was interested in intellectually. I was really interested in the moral gray area of what she did, and the fact that, like, even she doesn't totally understand it, and was in just a state of like such exhaustion and stress that she did make like bad decisions. And I really wanted to write an Asian American female character who also got to be a mess, because I think that's part, like, her mess and her vulnerability, and her feeling like such an outsider is partly what makes her relatable as a character. And I mean, it was important to me to center an Asian American woman as in a story that's about society, but to have it told through that lens, and to have her be messy and complicated, and not super easy to pigeonhole. Like, it totally bothers me when characters of color have to be noble to impart some kind of lesson, or to reflect back the white characters a certain way. And so I wanted her to have the full range of emotions and bad judgments available to her, not just to always do the right thing.
Yeah, I think it's such an important decision, and so beautifully executed. And I think also, your book does what some of my favorite books of all time do, which is gives us a plot that we're excited to see what happens next, and has a suspenseful sort of arc, but her interiority is equally as suspenseful or equally as dynamic. And so what's happening to her and what her interiority is grappling with, it's always in this incredible dialogue all the way through to the very last paragraph of the book. And I think that's so hard to do well, and you've just given us, I think, a main character in Frida that people will want to think about and talk about for a really, really long time. I mean, I just want to reread the book thinking about how she's moving through the world, and I think it's a book I and other readers will come back to for a really long time. So I have more questions, but I wanted to also just remind anybody who's listening that we really want your questions too, because you'll answer some questions, right, Jessamine?
I will definitely answer questions. I was I am so thrilled that part of the book spoke to you, especially because like that aspect of your book has totally like blown me away. And I want you to teach me how to write with metaphors, because I have like no metaphors at all in my book, and you have the most beautiful ones. And I think both of our books have a lot of female thinking in it, like a lot of female thought and gaze.
Yes, well, thank you. Don't say anything more about my book, because I'm going to make you come do my book tour with me, and then
I'm here anytime.
So as questions are coming in, I just want to ask you, if you would tell us, so I know because I get to see a little bit behind the scenes that not only are you this brilliant mind and talent, this book is amazing, but you have one of the best teams behind this book in all of publishing. You have Meredith, who is, I think, a genius, but also gave you those earrings, which are like.
She also gave me these book tour earrings to match my cover.
It's like her taste is undefeated. You've talked a little bit about your relationship, working with her. And then you had both Dawn Davis and Mary Cerrucci. And Mary Cerrucci, I think, is just one of the coolest, smartest, and just most dynamic editors. And then you have Liz Breeden, who has just been like killing this publicity and marketing tour. And then, of course, so many other people involved. So, a book doesn't come into the world via the author alone. And I wanted to just ask you, like, how has it felt to take these years and years and years of work, this incredibly rich product of this book, and then put it into the hands of people who have just absolutely, from at least my perspective, had your back and have helped usher it so elegantly into the world and into our hands?
Well, they are incredible, and I have to give a shout out to my publicist, Ann Tate Pierce, and Cassandra Rhodes and Shanice Bass, who have all been working really hard to put a tour together during the most challenging time. And I mean, if there's been a lot of media for the book, it's because of Ann and Cassandra's and hard work. And it's amazing to be receiving the talent and attention of these incredible women, and like to just be on a team of like all powerhouse marketing and publicity geniuses. And it's been also fascinating because I used to work in book publishing on the press side, and so I knew what went into a launch, but to actually be like part of it is like the inside baseball part of it is totally fascinating to me. There are so many people working on each book that comes out, and like even things like befriending my copy editor and proofreader, who I now talk to regularly on Instagram, has been a really like nice part of this experience. Like my copy editor was giving me advice on my daughter waking up at night and telling me that it was going to be okay. And I think because I wrote about a topic that's so intimate, that I think it results in conversations that like go to a really deep place right away. Like, because women, like talking about motherhood and birth and that whole range of experiences, I think it bonds people together in a different way. But it's amazing how many people have devoted their talent and attention to the whole process of launching this book, because it is seriously a lot of work on a lot of people, from a lot of people.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's just incredible, and yeah, your team has just done such a brilliant job, which is great because your book deserves the best and all these accolades. So we do have a quick question, or some questions. So one person says, it's interesting and appropriate how the book shows how the main character and other supporting mom characters of color have an additional layer of scrutiny and pressure from society and the judicial system. And that's such a huge part of your book. Can you talk about how you thought about race or culture or economic status of both Frida and the surrounding characters, and how that's sort of reflected through the book?
Well, that's a great question. I'll begin by saying that I'm just a fiction writer. I'm definitely not a sociologist or policy person or lawyer. And so everything I know just comes from reading I did. And I think I wanted the demographics of the school to at least gesture toward the demographics in real life, that the mothers who are caught and punished and surveilled are primarily women of color and primarily poor. So they're, in real life, someone like Frida wouldn't necessarily even catch the attention of the government because no one would be looking for her. So I think I wanted to draw attention to the fact that not all communities are surveilled to the same degree, and reflect that in the school a little bit, and also to have Frida wrestle with the privileges she has as an Asian woman versus and like where and how she doesn't quite fit in because of her class background either. I think the thing that shocked me, which perhaps shouldn't have shocked me, but something that I had not spent that much time thinking about, and perhaps we all should, is how much transgressions in parenting are sometimes just a product of poverty. And in some cases, parents were being punished for poverty more than their actual parenting choices. And so that was really heartbreaking. And I wanted to try to fold some of that reality into the book, even though it is a dystopian novel and a satire in a lot of ways. I wanted to hopefully call a little bit of attention to a phenomenon in America that I didn't know very much about before beginning research for the book.
Yeah. Sort of on a similar vein, another question is, mothers are often unfairly judged, as we're talking about, criticized, and were you concerned at all about working on a premise that could be scary for mothers as readers to explore, or were you even scared about possible judgment that you may receive? And we know that people have a tendency to read novels as if they were memoirs. So, did you have any trepidation about possible judgment?
I think I did, but honestly, I have been trying really hard to not read all the comments. And I very much appreciate everyone who's left a Goodreads or Amazon review, that they've read the book and taken the time to do that. But I haven't read all the reviews just because I've been warned not against doing so for my mental health. But in real life, the funny thing is I'm probably more like the annoying playground moms than like Frida, and probably I probably have some Susanna tendencies too, and especially I know that I have annoyed the hell out of a lot of my family and friends during the pandemic, because I've definitely been much more nervous about it than a lot of my loved ones. And so I am probably more finicky and uptight. I don't think I'm pushy and well-researched in the way of the playground moms, but I definitely have those, I definitely have some of those intense tendencies. So I think I haven't worried too much about it being read as memoir, but I have definitely been asked about it as if it's memoir. And so that's been interesting. But I do think the book asks a lot of moms to go on this emotional roller coaster, but I just hope that it's worthwhile. I mean, my close friend Jordan several of my mom friends live texted me while reading, and she got to page 12 and she's like, I'm having a panic attack and I'm only on page 12. And I was telling her it might stay stressful, but I hope it's worthwhile.
Yeah, it is. And I want to say, obviously, a lot of this is, we're talking about how mothers have responded, but I truly, and I know other people feel this way because everybody's reading it. It's a book for everyone. It's a book my husband loved. It's a book I would give to anyone
for reading.
And so I think I just want to say it is not for mothers. It's for anyone that's just living in the world and thinking complexly about any number of things. It's a book for everybody. So Paula wants to ask, did you have any influence from or inspiration from The Handmaid's Tale? Obviously, that's a book that has been thrown around in comparison. And she says, I say this because obviously the school portrayed in the book is scary. It is scary.
I actually probably referred more to Never Let Me Go, the Ishiguro novel, than The Handmaid's Tale. And one reason was because The Handmaid's Tale is a perfect book in so many ways. So I tended not to think about it too much because it was just so daunting. Because I mean, until we sold the book, I was just trying to finish it. Like the goal was just finish the book. And so if I thought too much of The Handmaid's Tale, it's one of those books that makes you feel like, oh, why do I bother? And so I tried to look to other touchstones rather than The Handmaid's Tale. And I think one reason why that book felt so daunting is because she invents an entire other society. And I wanted to do a much more minimalist dystopian world building, like just give you enough to let your imagination do the rest, rather than explain like, and now the entire political system has changed, and now the entire government has changed, and now like everyone has to wear clothes according to their rank. And so I think she did much more world building from the ground up in that book. And so I definitely was, I reread it once during the writing of my book. I am still watching the show, even though I know that it's regarded as quite grim, but I definitely was like inspired by her, but I tried not to refer to her book too much just because it felt so intimidating.
Yeah, I feel like we could do I want to do like another hour-long session about just Susanna, who is so funny. I mean, the way that you describe her, but also so human, and I mean, a lot of really complex feelings about her, but also about the world building. I'm stealing this phrase from a New York Times review of our friend Michelle's book, The Body Scout. This phrase, wrist flick world building. Somebody described his book as wrist.
Can I write that down?
Isn't that great? Wrist flick world building. And I thought that was such a great term. And I think it really, applies to your book, in that there is just this feeling that you kind of wave your hand, but yet the whole world is so clear. And it's done so subtly through so many, just like, again, that texture, those details that sort of build a texture, but nothing is belabored. And sorry, it's just, yeah, well, that's a whole nother hour. I can't get into all of that stuff, but it's so well done. Paula asks, are there other authors that inspire you, books that you would reread, and what's on your nightstand? I always love that question. And then one thing I would just add to that question maybe is like, when you're feeling stuck, or when you were, we all as writers like get out of rhythm with our own sentences sometimes, or whatever that feeling is of just murkiness. Are there books that you would open or go back to that like just nourished you or helped you feel sort of more in your rhythm?
Regarding the interiority question from earlier, the book that was really guiding me is probably one that people wouldn't necessarily think of in association with this book, is The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. And I would read it just a page or two at a time while I was doing revisions with Dawn, because Dawn really wanted me to work on character building. And so that book is perfect for character building. And I mean, I love Patricia Highsmith generally. Whenever people ask me what I've been reading, I tell them about your book. So I can't, so that is literally what I'm reading now. But some other books I'm really excited to read. I really want to read that book, Breasts and Eggs. I keep hearing so much about that. I mean, I read a lot of literature and translation. And so I started the book Flights last year, and I need to pick it up again. But the one that I'm really like need to read in terms of helping to get me writing fiction again, I really want to read Jamie Attenberg's memoir, which is coming out today and is on the way to me via pre-orders. So I think it's called I Came All This Way to Meet You. Like, her craft talks have been so inspiring, but I'm never organized enough to do the 1,000 words of summer. So I have all of them saved in my Gmail for like when I can like build out that block of time. But let's see, other books that inspire me. I love Orange World, the Karen Russell collection. One story that is like literally inspiring the world of the school is it's called Moving On, and it's in Diane Cook's story collection Man v Nature. And so that was truly an inspiration for the school, and Diane says that it's okay and she considers it a compliment. And I love Carmen Machado's collection, Her Body and Other Parties, and I'm obsessed with the Scandinavian writer Dorothy Norse and her collection Karate Chop, and of course I love Anne Carson. So there are certain books that I have next to me just to put good writing in my brain. But I also hope more people discover the novel Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls. It was out of print, I think, for 30 years, but it's a very crazy, perfect short novel, and it's about a lonely housewife who falls in love with a mysterious sea creature, and it's the perfect book, but very few people have heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't read that. That's a great. I'm gonna get that.
You'll love it.
Oh, good. Okay, I love it. That's like really good list. You'll have to write that down, and we'll like post it somewhere. I will read Miss Calvin. I'm gonna order that. So I think we're almost out of time, but I wanted to see if I could ask you one more question really, really quickly, which is you had this amazing essay in Elle recently.
Oh my gosh,
so
thank you.
I know you texted me about your nonfiction work.
It's so much harder than writing fiction. It's so much harder. You can't just fix a problem by making up something different.
Well, I loved that essay. Everyone should read it if you haven't read it yet. And so can we mark your nonfiction book down on our to read, can we put it on a calendar that eventually you're going to write a nonfiction book?
Oh gosh. I'm going to write down nonfiction book ? No one has ever asked me this. I appreciate that I could write a nonfiction book just for you. that there is one person who would read it, and that's Chloe, and maybe also my parents. I've always wanted to write about my dad's family history. I think if it was nonfiction, I think I'd be interested in writing about my family history more than myself. But like essay writing is really hard. Kudos to the nonfiction writers and journalists and essayists. It was so much harder than making stuff up.
Well, I know no matter what you write next, I'll be reading it for sure. So
Thank you. I appreciate that you've been in it with me with like a Chan family level of investment.
I'm like your mom clipping everything, like every single thing that's like coming through the news.
You're an honorary member of the Chan family now.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate both of you, and both your books are amazing. Let's keep in mind that Jessamine's book is out now. We definitely have copies at Book Passage, and we have wonderful book plates that you have graciously signed and sent to us. So some people can actually get a hold of signed first editions of this book that I think is, definitely going to be one of the most talked about books throughout the year. Kudos for you for getting out there early and getting the early buzz. And Chloe, we're looking forward to Easy Beauty early April.
It's so good. Everyone so good.
So looking forward to it. And thank you for indulging my questions. Although Chloe, I noticed that you actually didn't answer. You pitched it to Jasmine, but didn't answer it for yourself. So I noticed that.
I'll answer in April. I'll come back in April.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to it. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to our Book Passage audience. As mentioned earlier, you have lots of choices, especially in the middle of the day, and then later in the evening when you're watching in the archives. But we really appreciate your attendance, your participation, your support. Please do support our authors and your local independent bookstores. And just go to our website for more upcoming events. I know we've got something later this evening, and I've got another one tomorrow night. So we're cranking them out for the beginning of the new year. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jasmine and Chloe. Good luck with both your books and your tours coming up.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so fun.
My pleasure.